Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ad Project Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Scheller from Ad Advance, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Anders. Anders, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for anybody who's not familiar with you, maybe give us a quick intro and kind of how you got your start in the general
Hmm.
advertising space.
How I fell into it, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, that was back in the last century. I started out. I just mentioned that earlier.
I like
I
that. I
started.
like
I
that.
started out in SEO. Yeah. So let me give you that one again. So if you want to find me, I've made sure that when you search for me, you'll find me. Um, as long as you can figure out how to spell my name, yeah. So I'm Danish, but I left Denmark many, many years ago, and I'm based in France. So in beautiful Paris, or outside of beautiful Paris. We're looking forward or not to having the Olympic Games this summer. It'll probably be chaotic, so I don't know if I'll be remote working or going somewhere else. Anyway, that's about the 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 hygiene factors. Other than that, I've been in digital marketing since I ended my studies, pretty much, right? So um, that means that I've had the chance to see all of these different channels arise one by one, and I've actually coded HTML with my bare hands in a notepad. um, I have been a community manager for myself and my company. I have optimized and you know I don't know how many web pages for SEO. I have been link building even, but in the positive and white hat way. I was the first certified paid Google ads person in this country back in 2004.
that's awesome.
I set up a content marketing agency in 2013 as that was a big hit. I did some programmatic, and so it was only logical that I would end up doing Amazon ads at one point, and then going out to the wider retail media. I think I'll stop there, right? Because it's a long story. Happy to dig deeper into anything you're interested in, but yeah, I've seen a lot of it. Yeah, the only thing I'm not so good at has always been like emailing, and that I never quite managed to get that folded into the rest of it. Yeah.
Sure, that is awesome. And I
Mm.
love when you said you started last century too. I got to use that. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make me any younger, does it?
Yep. I had my first website that I coded with
Yeah.
HTML. I
Yeah.
used I used a program called Microsoft Front Page. I don't know if you
Yes, of
remember.
course.
It was
Of course.
yeah, it's
But
long gone now.
I was there
But
before front page, and front page was a revelation
yeah,
when it arrived. Yeah. So
that is
yeah.
awesome. So walk me through like how you ended up getting into the Amazon and the retail media
Yeah, so
space.
so what happened was I sold an agency. I sold my last agency. It was acquired by a sort of a digital commerce agency that was then acquired by Accenture Interactive, right? So I was kind of it was a roller coaster ride, and I got to a point where, well, it was just being acquired. There were so many changes, so many things, and I got the chance to jump off the bandwagon at that time, just when the acquisition happened, which was great because I had sort of I was completely free and I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I kind
Sure.
of had a blank page of saying, okay, now what? And what I'm so as I mentioned earlier, just before we started, I'm a curious guy, right? So I I I like to discover, uncover trends. And I had been a judge on various awards, digital marketing awards of different types. So I'd seen I'd seen the Holy Grail, or I'd seen the best of the best, and I'd been in contact with some of the best people out in the market, and I was also in contact with so many people that were experts in their area. So I was thinking, okay, I really like this. I really like to show what the best are doing. I also really like to look at what they're doing, which is not what Google, Meta, Amazon are saying that you should be doing, right?
Sure.
So cut through the hype. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of sort of. It's not. I wouldn't call it propaganda, but it's built communication. It's like a content marketing machine to push you in a certain direction, which is a commercial direction.
Sure.
And that is part of these platforms, right? That's part of the things they do. And I learned that because I'd been high up in WPP for a while, and I had some very close contacts with my Google, my Google agency manager, and show something else. I wanted also to help people that were in the position that I had been in, agency owner, having to decide what you bet on next year.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of people from outside of our little world. They're looking at us and they're saying, "Oh, they're so lucky. There's 20% growth in their market. It must be so easy. Just do the basics and you'll be winning." And I think we both know that is not the case. Right?
Yep.
Things are happening so quickly that if you don't take the right U-turn sometimes, or if you don't take the right left or right, or if you don't invest in the right technology or the right staff or the right competence, then you can be very quickly out of the game. So I think that was my leitmotiv. I wanted to help people. I wanted to share. I wanted to uncover things, right? So my company that I set up at that time, Innoville, was all about digital marketing trends. So I did a first report from on paid search basically, and I used all of this, and I did huge surveys, and I did interviews with experts, and I did this fabulous report, and then I tried to sell it online, and that was not easy. Yeah, it was really difficult. It generated a lot of visibility, then generated a lot of goodwill. But sort of the e-commerce dimension of it was really difficult. So it took me actually 5 reports to find the economic model for this. And when I came through the 5th one, I was like, okay, let's do something else. But that's sort of part of my story. But during that process of saying I want to detect these trends, one of the trends that I just uncovered was the rise of Amazon ads, and this is back in 2018.
Yeah.
And basically, I was a whistleblower. I was saying, guys, you gotta wake up! It's happening. Your world is gonna change. You have to pick up on this trend, right? And there was this big thing in my research which showed that all of these agencies that I've been surveying, they were saying that they were doing 80% of them were doing things like Google Shopping, right? So their clients would be selling something online. They would be retailers. They would be brands. They would be selling online. And then I asked them, okay, what about Amazon ads? And there was like 30% doing Amazon ads. And I was like, okay, so here's this huge discrepancy. There's a gap in the market, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of led me on to doing a second report, which was specifically on Amazon ads. It was part I wanted to learn, and it was part I wanted to show what was happening. And I did this with a great guy who had some Amazon experience, and then we went out and actually, it was not as easy as in other areas. We couldn't go out and just look at the awards and see who's winning or who's shortlisted. There were no awards about Amazon marketing. There was nothing, right? Who were the experts? The only way to find the expert was follow the right people on LinkedIn, ask around, and that was fascinating as well. So we got through to a number of people, and also wrote a big piece, a big report, basically saying, okay, this is how you work on Amazon. This is how you win on Amazon. This is how the game changes, and that led me on to led me into working in an Amazon agency for 2 years, right, where I set up the DSP seat. Managed that part of the business. Also, actually got the agency certified as a Google partner and all sorts of stuff. Getting some external traffic going into the Amazon equation. And after that, that was 2 years of my life, right? So very strongly involved in running Amazon campaigns, building strategies, pitching, learning how it evolved. and also optimizing campaigns, right? So yeah, I was hands in. I was learning all this stuff and getting all the certifications and optimizing campaigns, and I was also saying no, I don't agree, Amazon. You don't wait for 2 weeks to optimize your DSP campaign. That's just too long. You can start doing that after 2 days. You've got enough data to look at things. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that was my role for 2 years, and we kind of split ways. On friendly terms, but we were not sort of evolving in the same direction with the agency, which is fine.
Sure.
Still on good terms, and it sort of carried me into something else. So I joined a company that was building retail media technologies, like a platform type of technology firm. I didn't stay very long because actually I met another company called EPAM, and they were a partner of this technology firm. And I was really impressed by their knowledge, and and they were kind of, we could use someone like you. So I joined EPAM, so sometimes people call it the biggest company you've never heard of.
Okay.
And it is a discrete company sitting behind the lines, building all the good stuff. It is a company with a very, very high desire to excel in everything it does, building amazing digital platforms. And one of the types of platforms that this company builds is retail media networks. So you can't be building all the retail media networks out there, but this company is actually involved in, I think it's something like 3 out of the biggest 10 in the world. And then 20% of the company works for retailers overall, And it is a company with over 55,000 employees in the world, right? So it's
Wow.
a huge thing, and I've just joined this special 6 months ago, right? So I'm well inside, but I've joined this sort of the consulting branch of the business, where we work with retail media networks, with retailers on some of their challenges out there. So this has given me a totally different insight into that world, right? There's no Amazon here.
Yeah.
There are barriers that you wouldn't imagine, because there are organizational barriers on the client side, right? There's organization that has to evolve. It's not just the technology piece. There's organizations. There's technology. There are roadmaps, right? There are security issues. There is data confidentiality. There are so many things, so many moving parts in there. That is just fascinating. So that's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, and that's where we got connected too. Is I just love some
Yeah.
of the content that you were putting out on the retail media side, and some of the awesome trends that we're seeing, but also some of the challenges that we're seeing in
Yeah.
the space. There's a lot of different. I hear people referring to retail media as a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So, how do you define retail media?
3 words: advertising in commerce. Yeah.
Sure.
I try to keep it so simple, right? And I think it took a while before people were sort of ready to say it is actually just advertising. And it takes a long time for retailers to, because they come from a world of working with suppliers, and then they have negotiations with their suppliers, and then they do trade marketing. That was the past, yeah. The trade marketing they do is a very basic thing where they say, the supplier will say, take more inventory, right? Buy some more of my products, and the retailer will say, well, there isn't enough demand. Can you generate some demand? Can you help us generate some more demand so we can take some more inventory? This is the basic equation, right? It is take some more of my product, okay, but then you need to help me sell it. And that's the trade marketing equation, and I think you recognize that totally in Amazon. It's like, well, you're putting money in so that you can increase that sales velocity, so that you can push more stuff through the channel. That was the basic equation, but this was not retail. This was before retail media, right? So this was being sort of discounted from sales. It was being managed more or less. No, less transparently. It was being managed like, okay, we'll take this extra money. And it ended up in various places, in various ways, it has become part of a negotiation. So, and it's like, the invisible world of retail that we've heard of, but we don't exactly know how it works. Now, retail media now comes into the equation in these same relationships, and we're saying, okay, now let's put it above the line and make it transparent and actually optimize this whole thing. And that's where retail media is beautiful. And it's also where it becomes more complex, right?
Yep.
Because you gotta track everything. You gotta optimize. You gotta measure what success is. You gotta connect the dots between various data points. And I think I continue that mission of trying to educate, trying to share what's out there. But I've been kind of overtaken now by IAB because they've done an amazing job over the past 2 years. I mean, when I say they, it's I don't know how many. It's like 50, 60, maybe 100 people in the US, in Australia, in all over Europe, in the different IABs. There are working groups in every single IAB, and they are producing content. So they're building definitions, standards, capabilities mapping, retail media network mappings, technology mappings. There's all sorts of stuff out there, and it's really developed really, really quickly. So over the past 6 months, you've got all these documents coming out, and so I don't need to be so much more of I don't need to make those drawings and say this is what retail media is and what it isn't. But there are other lines that are moving in the space, right? So sure. It's kind of moving all the time. And now, so we talked about so I like that. I really like what Andrew Lipsman does from Insider Intelligence. So I think he's got a different company now. But when he sort of shows the future or talks about retail media 2.0 being the golden age of retail media is interesting, right? It's an interesting way to go, and then it also shows how far there is to the end. So
From the European standpoint too, I know you talked through how it's a little bit different compared to the US, and some of those pieces are like the fragmentation that you have. Like there's obviously language barriers or differences there and everything else. Like walk through like how you see the retail media scene being different if we look on like the European stage versus the North American or US stage.
Yeah, I think the first funny anecdote here is I put some stats on a slide, and I said 14.8% of retail is now online and then I said EU6, right? And this retailer said to me, "What does that mean, EU6?" That's the 6 biggest countries in Europe.
Sure.
And I think that so we when you're in Amazon, so I think you have the North American unified access. I think you have Mexico,
we have Canada, US, Mexico.
Right? Yep. And then you're going to add Colombia when it goes live, and you're going to
Brazil's in there. Yep.
All right. And we have I think it's EU9 now. And it's so that's just natural to me to say, okay, this is Europe. Like you have this entry point into Europe, like EU6, EU9, EU7, whatever whatever you can get into. And that was a funny thing, right? Because it kind of shows how when you look at it from an Amazon standpoint, it's like we're trying to make Europe a market. It's fascinating the way they're doing it, because you've got the whole logistics equation behind it, right? So across the US, you have all these warehouses, right, and they're connected. Of course, they're positioned so that they can cover the whole area. Now, in Europe, they're doing kind of the same thing, but it's not per country. It's on the distances, right? So you can have no warehouses in one country and then 5 warehouses in the next country, and they have strategically built up this network so that they could service the whole place. Which is fascinating when you look at the world map. You know the game of Risk, You know
Yep.
that with
I've
the
actually
bold,
been
yeah.
playing that with my kiddos
I,
lately.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
Risk is amazing, yeah. But I think so. The Amazon way of sort of getting into the continents is very similar. Like they've got this stronghold
Yeah.
in each continent, and then from that they build distribution, and then from that they open markets. Fascinating kind of approach. But so Europe, so they're trying to make Europe one market. It's really difficult, and some of the things they do, when we see it, we us Europeans, when we see what was it, Poland go live a few years ago, and
Yeah.
all the products were the ones from the German marketplace that had been auto translated, right,
Yep.
by artificial intelligence, which I'm not it's going to happen, yeah. But right now, when you give a a product listing and have it translated, it's getting better. But a few years ago, it wasn't very good, yeah.
Yep.
And you can see, and especially when you go into promoting a product or something, or writing an ad or something, it's just not right. Right, you have to have
Mhm.
the context. It's not just the words; it's also the context, the nuance of the language and things like that. So that was kind of painful, and I think that did the same for Sweden. I think they've done the same everywhere. Right, it's easy when you come from the US to the UK because it's basically, hey, it's the same country. A few words you have to change, but it's the same. It's the same language, right?
Yep.
But going from German to Dutch or German to Polish is a big step. Yeah. But there is this vision of having, EU X, right? But retail media networks or retailers, they don't work like that, right? So you have retailers that have certain geographical coverages. They're very often country-wise. So you've got retailers up in Benelux. They'll cover 2-3 countries. They may have another chain here and there, and then you'll have players like Carrefour, which is a big French player that has a huge presence worldwide also, and they also have South America, but nothing in the US, right? But it's a sort of a different nature of network. You have, I think, the second biggest retailer in so basically your market sizes are very different. So that's one thing. So you'll be when you're on Amazon, you're dealing with 9 different countries, and they will behave differently. It's not because a product works well in one country that it will work well in the next.
Mhm.
There is a brand notion, and the brands don't travel very easily. Whenever you're starting a new campaign, you're starting from scratch, and you know how that is. Because you've done it a number of times, yeah. So imagine taking that. So of course you learn from campaigns, but that's just if we're just staying within the Amazon sphere. That is a huge challenge. So the agency that I was working for had the speciality of having I don't know how many nationalities in there, so that one could jump in and manage part of a EU wide campaign. But somebody would be managing the overall and look at the stats and overall. But somebody would go in there and actually check on all the content and all the optimization and whether that made sense. And even the competition is different as well. So that's the Amazon space. Now, when you move out of that, you're looking at much smaller volumes. So I was saying something like 15%, and it's a little bit lower in Europe than in the US. So 15% of retail. Might be slightly higher. It might be 16, 17, 18 is online. The rest is offline. Yeah. So we're midgets compared to the size of these of what they do offline. And this was fascinating. There was a lot of focus on in-store at the NRF, and I think there's one of again Andrew Lipsman's slides was showing when you try to compare media inventory in physical stores compared to their online activity, and it would always be higher, right? And that's so there's this projection into, well, for those who have shops, in-store is the next big thing because it actually has bigger inventory than your online offering, right? And we're sitting here, you and I, with our Amazon background, we're saying it's all online. Forget that, it's really difficult with all that.
Stuff.
Yeah, just forget the rest of it. It's just too complex, right? It's too complex to manage. So, but I'm working with this reality of retailers who have physical networks, who and also have another a big strength there of especially those in grocery, purchase frequency. It's the frequency of the need, right? So it totally changes your view and your reliability of data when you've got the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah? So if somebody's buying the same thing every week,
Sure.
that's a pretty strong loyalty, yeah? Without having to have a loyalty card or whatever. It's just buying the same thing, same price. I do the same, yeah? And retailers know that. Amazon doesn't know
Sure.
that. Doesn't have that data. And we've all been saying for the past, I don't know how many years, well, it's the first party data, they have it all, Amazon's so powerful. Well, there's a type of company out there that has more powerful first party data than Amazon. So they have a card to play. And so you've got, so Walmart is playing that card and is amazing. So I'm not working on Walmart's activities, and we're not involved, I think, in that part. But they have both worlds, right? So they have a huge online market, which is homogeneous, and then they have this depth of data. So they just know a lot about their clients. Those who have loyalty cards. So I don't like loyalty cards. I don't. So personally, right? I don't want to carry up all these pieces of plastic around. So I don't use them a lot. So I'm not a good pupil. I'm not a good student.
Yeah, but if you use that same credit card every time, that is your loyalty.
Yeah, and they can
card.
probably tie that back into it. So they know a lot. And they can use that, and basically it also changes the way advertisers need to work with them, right? Because getting somebody to change a rock solid loyalty to one product to try another product is a big step, and it requires a different type of media exposure, and that's where in store and where maybe audio and so the digital displays in stores and maybe add some offsite, some branding in there as well. Yeah, maybe try to, get inside their Netflix streaming can probably help out. Yeah, and so we're moving into this whole different universe. I find so as I mentioned yesterday, we were presenting on this conference, and I think we at the end of it we were saying there's this report from Sky that just came out yesterday. No, today. It came out today. We had a premiere on it, but it says that on a survey of 1,000 advertisers in the US, retail media is more important for them than paid search, and that is the first time we've ever seen that.
Interesting.
Right? And that is a major piece of information here. So basically. It is becoming so important that it could end up being the most important media channel in the future.
Yeah.
So it feels like we've only just begun, which is amazing, isn't it?
With all these different retail media channels,
yeah.
As a retailer, how do you allocate budget between them, or even get consistencies in data and reporting?
Yeah.
As these different channels are emerging, and as
It's a
you're working
nightmare.
on building different retail media channels, like how do you try to drive that consistency, or how do you even navigate that?
So see the first thing you have within a retail media network, when you're doing on-site and then you're doing some off-site and then you're doing some in-store, you don't get the same data points, right? Yep. You're not in the same context. You're not measuring the same thing. So suddenly your media planning, and that becomes the entire offering as well from the retail media network, has to be shaped in a different form. So you will be down to day parting, and saying, okay, I will look at uplift. I will be do day parting, and some of these retailers are building into their campaign functioning. They're building in a baseline group that is not exposed, which is a great, it's a great idea. So basically they keep out like 10% of any audience group. They will not expose them, and then they will compare.
Yeah.
And they of course they of course connect. So you'll connect the till, all the data from the till. You'll connect. So that's one source of data. You'll connect it with the loyalty cards when they are there,
Sure.
or credit cards if you're allowed to. I'm not sure, what the exact legislation says there. You'll connect that back to the devices. Mobile device and computer, and then you'll look at on-site. You'll look at basket information. You'll look at navigation. You'll look at off-site exposure, and you'll pull in whatever you can find on your digital display into that, right? So we're talking. I don't know how many did I say? Was it like 8 or 9 sources here that we're pulling together into one place? So these are becoming huge data pools, right? That you need to manage and try to extract the right information from. So that's just on the planning side. And you were saying something else. I was just saying this is inside a retail media network. Yeah, you can then have within that network you can have several retailer brands, right? Very often there are either alliances or the groups have grocery, and then they have DIY, and then they have pharmaceuticals or beauty products, whatever. So you can have loyalty cards that actually cover all of these, or you can have partial coverage, and then you can have logins that have partial coverage of this as well, right? So that's, we're still within just one retail media network.
Yep.
It is utterly complex to manage, and what you said was, well, how do you manage when you have several retail media networks? Yeah? And we're not there yet. So my general feeling is that there are companies like Sky and PackView that are trying on the big chunks, right, to aggregate some of the data. You'll never get down to the granularity where you can look at a segment that is interested in the brand, or you've done an overlap, you've done a data clean room overlap between your own audience, CRM extraction with the retailer, brand preference to do something. That is never going to work across several retail media networks, right? So you've got sort of the simple campaign execution that goes on-site, off-site, the ones that we know from Amazon, that we love, right? We can optimize all the way through to the sale, and we can sort of shape this into something that improves and gets better. Now you can do that across the Walmarts and the Krogers and the EU9, and you can do that across a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But as soon as you go into the deeper work with one retail media network, that connection, I don't see it happening in the coming like 3-4 years, which is a long time. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get there yet. And I think once we get closer to that, I think it's going to be AI driven, because I don't think you can actually do it otherwise, right? I don't think you can actually. You're always going to have holes. You're always going to have data discrepancy. You're always going to have things that you can't account for. So I think we're potentially going to see something, new types of media planning tools, AI driven, that plug into huge data sets and come up with something. And it's like the bid optimizer. You're just going to have to test and see if it works, and if it doesn't, well, think again and do something else. I think that's the only way. I don't see how this can work otherwise. So in other digital media, since forever, we've always been saying, we just need a little bit more data, and then we should be able to see the whole picture of omnichannel and full 360 view of the client. And we never got there, did we? And now we're moving into another dimension with more data.
And now it seems to be moving backwards, honestly, with privacy updates and everything.
No, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there. But AI can cover a lot of that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, but whether AI comes to, for AI to work, you need data volumes and you need automated processes. So let's concentrate on building those first, yeah.
Sure.
Because until we have those in place, until we have all the standards in place, until we're measuring the same things,
Yep.
we're speaking the same language, we're not going to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really in the early stages. Let's set all
Yeah.
the standards. Let's
Oh,
make
we-
sure
we're
that
just-
everything's consistent.
we're
'Cause until we
just
get
getting
that,
going.
yeah, you can't even
Yeah.
compare the two numbers because they're not going to be measuring the same thing.
No, but there's a lot of improvement in terms of what we said, the basics of on-site, off-site, right? That there's a lot of improvement, and I think the tools that's a much shorter horizon to get tools that will be able to plug into 10, 15, 20. I think there are 200 retail media networks out there now, but
crazy.
I think you'll be able to plug into the bigger. You should be able to cover maybe 60% with tooling over the next year or so, I think, right? So that at least some of it you can kind of plug it in and do your sort of traditional media thing on that to see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. So over like the next year or two, what's some things that you get really excited about or that you expect that we're going to see? I know you've kind of touched on some, but anything that you think is going to really progress over the next year or two in the space?
Yeah, so no, what I really find fascinating is the connection with video and CCTV, so CTV, right? Connected TV, with the Netflix partnerships that are
Sure.
being signed across the world, because they're happening in many places, in parallel with Amazon Prime opening up the video part of their inventory. I think that's really interesting because it's really interesting and really challenging, right? Because we're getting a whole new dimension of opportunity, of possibility to do things.
Sure.
With fairly accessible CPMs. It's not crazy, and with a possibility to influence people, on the brand side, very early on in the user journey. I think that's interesting because I think it was totally missing, right? And Amazon was built on the bottom of the funnel, just like Google was at the beginning, right? So, and then you kind of build it up to become much broader. And I think that's probably the most fascinating thing that is coming on to at least onto the online thing part of the equation.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the equation, I think. The idea of connecting the displays in the shops. I think it makes sense to kind of. I remember many years ago there was this guy, and he talked about transmedia storytelling. Yeah, so you're moving from one media to the next, and there's a story that goes on. Right? I think that's kind of the dream of any marketer, to be able to say, okay, we're deciding actually how this works and what the user will see in what sequence.
Yeah.
Telling that story to try to convince them. If they're not convinced, we'll stop because the story has ended. Right? I'm hoping that will happen as well. That we stop, trying to tell the same story over and over again. But being able to orchestrate channels and tell a story, and I think you can't tell that kind of story without video. It becomes something quite fascinating, I think, from the advertiser's point of view. Trying to connect those dots, right? Connect them all together to make it all feel coherent, to make it all feel that it makes sense. I think that's the kind of trust brands need to build, over the coming years, where there's been sort of you don't hear the same story when you move from one channel to the next, right? So I think that's the big frontier.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and it's like you said, every day it's like constantly it's like reinventing yourself just with how quickly things are changing, and taking that time to take a step back and think through. And that's why I've loved this conversation, just kind of taking a bigger picture perspective, because sometimes you can get so in the weeds that you need to pull yourself out. And there's so much changing right now in the space.
Absolutely. And I think so I think the reason why why we're doing that is that when we're talking with somebody who's now going to invest, I don't know how much money in a retail media network, they need to have a roadmap. They need to think about where it's going to take them, right?
Yep.
So I think we take that step back, and I enjoy that a lot. Because it sort of combines my desire to look into the future, and also to be, sharing of the knowledge and experience that I've accumulated. So, so hopefully we can help some people go in the right direction.
I love it. I love it. So Anders, I've really enjoyed following your content. For the people who want to connect with you or follow you, where should they go?
Yeah, so I kind of stopped doing things like Facebook and lately Twitter as well. I think I'm not sure when I did the last tweet there. So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty much nowhere else. Then I'm on some conferences from time to time, but LinkedIn is the sure hit, and I love questions. So anybody who wants to connect with me, make sure to ask me a question. I'll be happy to respond to it. Don't just send the invitation without anything. I'll probably ignore that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. I know it's currently late for you right now, too, so I appreciate you spending some of your night with me.
It's a pleasure, Joe.
Yeah.
To have this discussion and great topics. I'll be sure to be following your podcast in the future.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Anders. And for all those who are listening to the Ad Project podcast, as always, really appreciate you listening, and we will see you on the next episode.